Hello and welcome to Transfers Podcast, powered by FootballTransfers.com, where we bring you news, insight and analysis on that most important and least important things, football. Now, I'm Ronan Murphy and I'm delighted to be joined again on the show by Peter Staunton. He's an editor at Anfield Watch and the former chief correspondent of Goal. And we have Peter back on the show because Liverpool are in crisis. So who better to talk to about Liverpool's current crisis? How are you, Peter?
I'm doing very well, Ronan. How are you?
I am very well. A bit better than Mo Salah and Arne at the moment. I think we're both doing. We're looking forward to the festive period. So yeah, things should be good. And welcome back to the show, all our listeners and viewers. So yeah, let's dig in. Salah versus Slot. Salah last season, he was. I don't think it's hyperbole to say he was put in one of the best seasons ever in the Premier League, and this season he's now on the bench. He's now in the gym posting photos. So what has happened here?
Yeah, it's been a hell of a downturn for Mo Salah over the course of the last few months. Been left out of the team for 3 Premier League matches in a row, during which time Liverpool picked up a win and 2 draws against 2 newly promoted teams, and the win against West Ham, obviously, who are no great shakes themselves. Commits what many might think is the ultimate transgression by criticising the club, the manager, and we think the overall hierarchy of Liverpool, because he didn't get off the bench against Leeds last weekend. Subsequently left out of the trip for the Champions League game against Inter Milan, which Liverpool won courtesy of a soft penalty, you would say. Earned by Florian Wirtz, dispatched by Dominic Szoboszlai. And if you were to read a lot of the commentary that's out there today, you would say that you would think that that's the crisis averted. People are talking about how statesman-like Slot has been, how well his tactics worked last night, how this is laying down a marker for the rest of Europe and so forth. But I'm not entirely sure that should be analysed in that context, because okay, Liverpool won without Salah last night, on Wednesday night. But by the same token, they didn't have Salah in the lineup against Leeds at the weekend, and they drew 3-3. So, you know, the results with Salah have been indifferent. The results without Salah have been indifferent and inconsistent. I don't think it's all Salah's fault right now. And I think that we're going to have to look for other solutions and maybe other reasons for Liverpool's poor form, other than the fact that Mohamed Salah is not happy about playing right now.
Yeah, if you look at even some of the way the media narrative is going at the moment, the Sky Sports graphic, Liverpool with Mo Salah and with Liverpool without Mo Salah, and the difference, they were trying to point out the difference is that actually won more percentage of games or whatever without him. But anyone who watched them last week, and Arne Slot watched them every week, kind of saving his bacon at times for Liverpool, because he was so crucial. He scored 34 goals, he got 23 assists in 52 games last season. But this season, 19 games, 5 goals, 3 assists. I know football isn't won on spreadsheets, but those stats are a huge difference between now and last season. But I think, and you definitely think, that it's not Salah's fault, and you have to look at maybe who they've sold, who they've brought in, the supply line for Salah. All these, a completely new forward line that Liverpool had this season. It's like Salah and Gakpo kind of left, and everybody else is different, and no wonder they're kind of struggling. And he can't be blamed, I suppose, for all this. I know you think, and I think a lot of people think, but maybe not the media think, that there are reasons above Salah or more than Salah that these struggles are happening. You look at the forward line this season, it's a completely new forward line. Only Salah and Gakpo are left. A lot of the players kind of around him were sold. I know we had the sad passing of Diogo Jota as well. That has to weigh on things. You can't kind of erase that from your mind. But yeah, if you look at the business that the club did off the pitch, some of the Salah's kind of the key providers for him are all gone now, and this is a different team, and you can't expect him to be the exact same player as he was last season.
Yeah. Look, I do feel sorry for Salah in that context. You know, he's lived through a few different iterations of a Liverpool forward line. Obviously, he had that wonderful front three between Mane, Firmino, and himself. You know, which brought Champions League, which brought the Premier League. That all changed, and that was the attack was reconstructed around Salah. And he managed to hold his own, more than hold his own last year with the Playmaking Award, the Top Scorer Award, and the Premier League Player of the Year Award. I think it was the first time that was ever achieved by the same player. And I think the changes that have taken place at the club on personnel-wise over the summer have taken their toll on Salah. The biggest reason for me that we can see a decrease in his output is that they didn't replace Trent Alexander-Arnold. We spoke about the contracts that they needed to get done last year, which were Van Dijk, Salah, and Trent Alexander-Arnold. They ultimately got 2 done, but the one that got away is causing the most damage. And he's not even having that good time at Real Madrid either. So, this has been a bit of a Pyrrhic victory for Real Madrid in getting Trent Alexander-Arnold, because I think Liverpool miss him far more than Real Madrid are benefiting from having him. Now, for a few different reasons, look, Trent wasn't a right back in the same way that, Conor Bradley's a right back. He's just not that kind of player. He's a playmaker from in there. And Salah was the primary beneficiary of that playmaking ability, whether those were balls in behind for Salah, or whether Trent was able to relieve the pressure on Liverpool by getting a crossfield ball in and then moving the team up the pitch. Liverpool just don't have that same kind of threat, that same type of quarterback from that position that they have that they had last season. The other one that left, which I think has been a huge loss to Salah, has been Luis Diaz. I think he's probably the most underrated player that Liverpool had last season. They were content to take the money from Bayern Munich. He's got off to a flyer in the Bundesliga as well. But when you look at the way that he presses from the front, whether that was from left wing last season or from centre forward, and the number of times that he and Salah combined directly for goals, I think it was maybe 9 goals overall last season in all competitions they combined for, either one for the other. Now that's huge. Those 2 players in particular taken out of the lineup for Salah are huge. That's a big impact. So. And that says nothing about Darwin Núñez either. And we know towards the end of last season in an interview, Mo Salah was asked, who his preferred strike partner was or who his favourite player was. And he actually mentioned Darwin. Now, again, that might come to a surprise for a lot of people who watch from the outside or from people who analyse the data. But the feel, obviously, that Salah had with with these other front players and with Trent as well, it's irreplaceable. And it was up to Arne Slot over the summer, as he was establishing this new front line, to come up with a way to get the best out of Mo Salah. And we haven't done that. Instead, all we've seen or all we've heard is that Salah's numbers are down. His work rate isn't good. He doesn't track back. He moans when he's not in the team, yada, yada, yada. Now, I think Salah is so good and he's so legendary and he deserves to be on a pedestal that he should be treated almost like a Messi type figure. And we've seen what happened with Messi since he's slowed down over the course of the last few years. He won the World Cup. Last week we saw him win the MLS Cup with David Beckham's Inter Miami. Now that might not seem a lot, but I've been watching that team all year long. And for me, Messi is still the best player in the world. He is still the best player in the world. And the reason he gets to be the best player in the world is because he's been platformed. They're not asking him to run up and down the right wing. They're not asking him to press as a false 9 from the front. They're giving him the right conditions to perform. Egypt do the same thing for Salah. They play more as a central playmaker and they get rewarded with loads and loads of goals, loads and loads of assists. Whereas Liverpool and Slot seem to be asking Salah to do the same thing that he was doing 5, 6, 7 years ago. And he's just not the same player. Now, towards the end of last season, when I noticed that Salah was on the periphery of big games, Newcastle in the EFL Cup final, PSG away in particular in the Champions League when he was pocketed by Nuno Mendes, I thought that Liverpool needed to get him more central into a number 10, into a playmaking role. And I actually thought the signing of Frimpong would help with that, because Frimpong could do almost what Serginho Dest did at Barcelona when Messi moved inside. He could go up and down the flank, do that tracking back from the right wing, and allow the central playmaker to take over, have more touches, have more influence on the game. Instead of moving him closer to the goal, what Slot seems to have done is moving him even further away from the goal. You look at his heat map, you look at his touches, you look at his involvements, he's not getting into the box as much. He's not benefiting from this overall new structure, I don't think. Now, Liverpool have put all their eggs in the basket of players like Isak, 125 million, Florian Wirtz, 116 million. So they have to get behind these new guys. But in the meantime, they've got Salah to accommodate. And I actually think that he's become a bit of a scapegoat for these failed signings so far, and for Slot being unable to come up with a new system to get the best out of him.
Yeah, it seems like Salah, maybe the natural progression might have been into kind of a number 10 role, number 9 role, somewhere kind of more central, like you're saying. So he doesn't have to do the busy work essentially on the wing. But what Liverpool have signed is 2 number 9s and 1 number 10. So he's definitely not going to get those roles. And some of those, Ekitike aside, I think Isak and Wirtz, they've kind of flattered to deceive. Haven't lived up to the price tag. Isak has not been fit at times. He hasn't played 90 minutes. Even in the game against Inter Milan, he doesn't touch the ball enough. The ball doesn't get to him. He isn't involved. And I think if you look at the way Wirtz and Isak played last season for their respective clubs, they played kind of a bit deeper. They got the ball, they ran at defences, they were able to kind of get the ball in space, they were able to drive at defenders, they were able to do. They were playing in a totally different system, or two totally different systems at other clubs that is definitely not the way the slot has Liverpool set up at the moment, and is definitely not suiting them. It's not suiting Salah. It's not suiting anybody at the moment. But Salah seems to be getting the brunt of the blame for this because he's maybe the oldest, or because they didn't spend all 300 million on him, say.
Yeah, look, I think Liverpool have been afflicted by individual errors this season, but they've come at the other end, whether that's Kirkes or Konate or Van Dijk, right? He's not going to escape the scrutiny for that as well. So they have made mistakes, all of those guys at the back, whether that's leading to penalty kicks, whether that's playing people onside when they shouldn't, whether that's giving the ball away, whatever. I don't really blame any individual attacker for what's going on, for Liverpool's lack of output up front or for their lack of identity. That to me sits with the manager, because I'm looking at Liverpool every week and I don't see the plan. I don't see how they are trying to score goals. Every single goal they score looks to be unique, random, unrepeatable. Wirtz gets tugged in the box last night, goes down, penalty kick. The week before, they're playing against Leeds United. Leeds give the ball away twice. Ekitike runs in on goal, scores one. A cross comes in from the right for his other goal. He looked a bit that he could have been offside. But basically what I'm saying is that they seem to benefit from these fortuitous moments. Whereas I'm looking at the great teams, like a PSG team last year, or even if you go back to Guardiola's best Man City teams, you could see what a Man City goal looked like. You could see what a PSG goal looks like. I don't see what a Liverpool goal looks like this season under Arne Slot. Now, that's not the individual striker's fault. So every week on Anfield Watch, we could pick a new striker or a new forward to say he's not underperforming, and here's the reasons why, and here's the numbers why. But you have to scale that back. You have to unwrap that and say, okay, the reason why none of these players are performing to the extent that we know they have done at other clubs and in other seasons is because the structure isn't there. Now, that's on Slot. I believe that's on Slot. One player that they missed out on over the summer, which I think could have changed all of this, was Mark Gahey. I think if they got Gahey in, they might have been able to switch to a 3-man backline, and then they could use Kirkes and Frimpong as wing-backs, and then they could get more of a solid structure up front with maybe Wirtz and Salah in those number 10 roles. But they declined to do that. And Slot will play nothing other than this variation of his 4-2-3-1. And he's getting increasingly diminishing returns out of it. And the most frustrating thing from a Liverpool fan perspective is that in the press conferences, we hear Slot talking about, teams are playing in a low block against us, as if that's a surprise to him, or as if they're not allowed to do that. And then he also talks about the number of high and long balls that teams play against them as well. So, teams have figured Liverpool out. I think they actually figured them out after the first turn of the fixtures last season. If you look, there was a big drop off, not only in Salah's numbers between sort of February and March, but Liverpool overall since then haven't been the same team. Because teams only had to play them once, then they work them out. And when they play them again, they know how to play against Liverpool. Slot hasn't counteracted that.
Yeah, and I think maybe a lot of the times last season, Salah was bailing Slot out, and maybe he didn't get... I know he won every award, like you said earlier, he won everything, but maybe he's not being given the credit now for the kind of saviour role that he performed at times last season, because there was so many kind of crucial late goals or late assists, or maybe just Salah kind of bringing up the players around him, and they were the ones to score the goals. But I think it made such a difference last season, and you're not seeing that this season, and maybe because the system that they're playing at the moment, it doesn't kind of allow for that. And Salah has done it a couple of times this season, but there's too much weight, I think, on everybody.
Yeah. I think against Atletico Madrid in the Champions League was more or less vintage Salah in a game like that. I do feel sorry for him. He's a genuine world class player. I think he's maybe the most important player that Liverpool have had this century. Some Liverpool fans might disagree and say that it's Steven Gerrard, but I don't know. I think it's Salah, because he's the attacking player that helped them get over the line and deliver the big prizes in the end. So yeah, I think he's a victim of what's going on at Liverpool. And you want to talk about his form last season. Obviously, he had the added incentive last season because he wanted a new contract. Let's be honest about that. Now, this brings another issue over whether Richard Hughes, the sporting director, was right or wrong to give Salah a new contract, and maybe what the motivations were for that new contract. Okay, so Salah delivers, I think, 29 goals and 18 assists in the Premier League last season, carries off all the individual awards. I mean, it's an outstanding season. And by any metric, you see a player performing like that, you might be inclined to say, okay, yeah, he's worth having around, for another season or two. Ronan, he's a 33-year-old winger. He's going to be 35 by the time this deal ends. There isn't an awful lot of 33 to 35-year-old wingers who are earning that kind of money in the world, not even in Saudi Arabia right now. So for me, it's a risk. Basing a new contract on what a player has just done, as opposed to what you think he might do, is a risk. Now, in the cold light of day, is this the type of decision that Man City would have taken? I don't think it is. I think Man City would have let him go. The same way that they let Kevin De Bruyne go, because they weren't prepared with his injury record and his age and so forth and his wages to give him what he wanted. So off he went into the sunset and he joined Napoli. He's done nothing for Napoli since he joined there. Now, maybe Salah should have been given a similar type of farewell. Maybe he should have. When it comes to March and April and you're going to reconstruct the attack in the summer, and Salah's not going to be a firm part of your attack because he's not been a firm part of the attack this season. Maybe you say, okay, you know what? We can take that saving of the salary and let him go, and then he can go and join San Diego, or he can join a club in Saudi Arabia, or he can go wherever he likes. They didn't do that. Why? My theory is that they thought, if we renew Salah and things aren't going very well next season when we reconstruct this attack, we will still be able to earn some money off him when it comes time to get rid of him. Now, I think they're trying to protect their investment with Salah by renewing the contract, rather than saying that you're going to be a key part of the team for the next 2 years. I think that the renewal now, in hindsight, especially after what Salah was saying after the Leeds game about somebody wants me out of the club, in hindsight, it looks clear as day that that's what they wanted to do with Salah, was renew his contract so they could get some money in for him in January. Now, £400,000 a week plus your bonuses for a 33 to 35-year-old winger. Alarm bells are ringing. There's no way Liverpool would buy a player like that. They wouldn't buy a player like that, especially one that's going to AFCON for up to about 5 or 6 weeks, and one that's going to the World Cup next summer, who's going to be coming back for the 26-27 season without a preseason, having played how many games in North America for Egypt, where he's expected to carry the threat for Egypt as well, because he's a captain. So no way in hell Liverpool would buy a player like that. So what led them to the decision to renew a player like that? And for me, I think it's because they've sniffed the opportunity of doing a deal for him in January. But Saudi Arabian clubs they're not as naive as you might think that they once were. They're not paying that kind of money for players in their 30s right now. The age profile of the players that they're bringing in, whether that be a Retegui or a Darwin Núñez, has come way down. They're players in their mid-20s now that they're playing big bucks for. Sure, the salaries are still on offer. Ronaldo's still making huge money. Mane is still making huge money. Benzema. But that was the first wave of signings, maybe from 2 years ago. It's not going to happen this time. I think if a Saudi club is going to take Salah, they're going to take him either on loan, if they can, or else look to buy him out of his Liverpool contract. I can't see them paying 25, 30 million for Salah, plus another 120, 150 million on salary.
Yeah, it kind of leaves, what do Liverpool do now? The question is, what does Salah do now? Also, what do Liverpool now do now? Is Salah going to play for Liverpool again? Have we reached that stage that we're questioning, is it kind of too far? With AFCON on the horizon, like you said, with January transfer window just 2 weeks away now? It is 2.5 weeks away at this stage. So does Salah play for Liverpool again? What happens now?
It's very uncertain, Ronan. I'll be honest. I think the next couple of days are really crucial, because Arne Slot, in a very revealing interview with Clarence Seedorf after the game against Inter the other night, pretty much said, why should it be me to reach out to him? He wrote that back in the press conference, but that was the implication, as in, why should I be the one to take the initiative and ask Salah to come back into the fold? Implication there being that it's time for Salah to apologise, and if he does apologise, then maybe he's got a chance of getting back into the squad for the game against Brighton at the weekend. Is that going to happen? I don't know. Now, I respect Salah a lot, but these players come with a certain type of ego. Will his ego allow that? Will his ego allow him to say, look, I made a mistake. I want to get back into the squad and I'll do anything to ensure that happens. Now, I don't know where he's going to be playing his football come January, because if he doesn't play against Brighton and he stays away, for example, this weekend, that buys Liverpool a lot of time, because he goes then for the next 4 or 5 weeks. If Egypt gets to the final, I don't think it's till the middle of January, 18th of January or so. So that buys them some cooling off time, whether that's to negotiate a deal with another club or whether that's just for Salah to cool off himself and then come back and be reintegrated into the team for the second half of the season. But yes, I think we've probably reached a stage where, we could be 50% assured that Salah's probably played his last game for Liverpool.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. And if you look at the way the media are reporting it, and Jamie Carragher is obviously is the face for that at the moment. And we might as well say that he's bringing up kind of references to Salah being a flop at Chelsea when he first arrived. That's what he was known as, and all this sort of stuff that the Liverpool, some of the big names seem to have turned their back on Salah, and it's kind of really disappointing to see when you consider all he's given to the club and all the trophies he's won, all the goals he's scored, all those moments, they cannot be erased.
I am really disappointed by that, actually, because it feels like there's been a switch flipped over the course of the last few days, and it feels like there's this pervasive sense within the media that this has been all Salah's fault. The poor season has been Salah's fault somehow, and I don't like the implication from Carragher and others that Salah was lucky that Liverpool picked him up. Essentially, he wasn't a nothing player when Liverpool bought him. He was on the radar for the recruitment staff for a reason. It's because they thought that his performances at Roma showed that he was the man to carry them forward, and it was bang on. It was probably the greatest signing in the club's history. So for him to say that he was picked up as a Chelsea flop and he's never won anything with Egypt, and Liverpool gave him the platform to perform, I think is revisionism, and I don't think it's fair to Salah whatsoever. Liverpool, I hope they treat him with the respect he deserves if he's going out the door in the next few weeks. But they mustn't forget what they've had over the course of the last decade or so with Mo Salah. For me, it's a player that's up there with, I mentioned Messi already, but outside Messi and Ronaldo, I would say that over the course of the last decade, he's been the next best player in the world. The next best player in the world over the course of that time, for his consistency, for his honours, for his goal scoring, for whatever else you want to name. And I don't want to see that legacy diminished over the course of the next few days over this storm in a teacup that he's had with Arne. It's just not fair. You have to be able to handle these players in a different way, these all-time legends. And right now, I don't think he has been. Now, it's particularly frustrating for me looking at it from a perspective of somebody who's covered Liverpool for a long time. And I've seen the Ballon d'Or voters ignore Salah. I've seen them put him in fourth place. I've seen the Confederation of African Football ignore him completely since he won 2 African Footballer of the Year awards. I think 2018 was the last time he won one of those. I've seen FIPRO ignore him. I've seen UEFA ignore him. All the award-giving bodies have ignored Salah over the course of the last few years, played down his achievements and almost disrespected him. Liverpool fans have picked up on that, and they understand, or they understood, that Salah was a great, and for him to be ignored by the governing bodies and the awards-given bodies was wrong. I think Liverpool might be about to fall into the same trap and undermine everything that Salah has done for them. And he doesn't deserve that. No,
he doesn't. If you look at kind of some of the other clubs when the greats go, if you look at Thomas Muller, the way he kind of aged out of Bayern, they knew that writing was on the wall. He kind of knew the writing was on the wall, but the way they said farewell to him, they weren't giving him a new contract. He knew he wasn't getting a new contract. He was allowed to go off to MLS. They're kind of, if you look at the way what will probably happen with him in the future is what has happened to many other Bayern Munich players at the club. They'll end up working in the boardroom in a few years' time, because that's the way other clubs kind of treat the legends. And I have the feeling this is definitely not what's going to happen here. That kind of Liverpool at the moment they're burning the bridge with Salah, and it's a disgrace, to be honest.
Yeah, the Muller one is interesting. Obviously, he's got a couple of years, I think, on Salah, but there's no sentiment there. Okay, there was no sentiment. He was making what, 20 million euros a year, and Bayern sat him down, I think, in March or April last year, and said, "That's it now. There's no more contracts." Now, that's going to be a huge source of hurt for Muller, because he's not going to be a one club man. He's going to have to go and start again with his family somewhere else, and never going to make that money again. But these are the decisions that these superstar clubs take. They're decisions. These are the hard decisions that they're paid for. So, if Bayern had renewed Muller for another 2 years, what would that indicate? On 20 million a year, does that indicate that he's going to be a key player? Does it indicate that they want to sell him? Maybe Liverpool could have learned a lesson from that, from the way that De Bruyne was treated and the way that Muller was treated. By the way, Messi was treated by Barcelona a few years back too, when he ended up leaving for PSG. So, I don't know. Like I say, I'm not sure what their motivation was to give him a contract. If they weren't going to make him a centrepiece of the team, if they weren't going to make accommodations to get the best out of him, if they weren't going to have a look to adapt the system to cater to Salah, I don't know what the motivations were for that next contract. And he needs to leave through the front door. He needs to leave with his head held high. And for me, like I said, I think he needs to go down as Liverpool's most important, greatest player and greatest transfer of the 21st century. There's no doubt about it in my mind.
Yeah, and if we had recorded this podcast 2 weeks ago, we probably would have had a completely different discussion. We might have talked about Salah not being his best this season, but everybody hasn't been great. It would have been the narrative. There's been individual errors, or that, like you mentioned earlier, there's been players underperforming, the new signings underperforming. We would have been talking about, does Arne Slot have a future at Liverpool? That's probably where we were.
Yeah.
Just a few days ago, even before all this Salah stuff. So the question is then whether Salah is going, but I think there should always also be the question: is Slot going to go? Is he still going to stay around? I know he won the league last year, and people are thinking, "Well, you're crazy if you sacked him after that won the league." But that's the discussions that were happening 2 weeks ago, and if they had lost to Inter Milan in the Champions League on Tuesday night, if they had a bad result against Brighton this weekend, etc. Those questions still remain, because the result against Inter Milan, like you said, it was pretty soft. As I know, the handball in the first half was controversial too, and you will have these elements and times in games, but the performances haven't been great every match. You can't kind of point to a match and say, well, this is where Liverpool turned the corner and now they're good again, because you're not seeing that identity.
Fantastic game against Real Madrid in the Champions League. That was like the old Liverpool. I was very, very impressed with that. But beyond that match, I just don't see it. I don't see he's kicked them on. I don't see he's integrated the signings. I don't think he's come up with a method to counter the way teams are playing against Liverpool right now. And yeah, you're right. The discussion a couple of weeks ago, a few days ago, a week ago would have been, should Liverpool get rid of Arne Slot? Who's going to replace Arne Slot? And they're legitimate discussions. So maybe Slot and Hughes have made a rod for their own back by banishing Salah. Because if the performances and if the results don't improve with Salah nowhere near the team, then who's next for the blame? Because right now, I think the media reporting over the course of the last 4 or 5 days, since the interview that Salah gave on Saturday night, has cast Slot in almost a heroic light. I've seen him described as calm, assured, measured, like they're describing a US president. And for me, all of a sudden, it seems
a former
strange,
US president, maybe, not a current.
Maybe a former US president. But it feels like they've circled the wagons around Slot. And obviously, the club reporters are going to convey the information in a way that the club is going to approve of. But this hero v villain stuff that they've set up between Slot and Salah, I'm not buying it for a second. Now, that said, I should provide a bit of balance and say that, did Salah do the right thing on Saturday night by coming out and saying what he said? Look, I've seen bigger players than Salah, like Thierry Henry, for example, saying it's not the way that you deal with things. You deal with them in-house, and you should always put the needs of the team above the needs of you as an individual. Now, but should Salah have done it? Probably not. I don't think he should have. Maybe he should have kept it to himself, or at least had this discussion in private. But did Liverpool expect anything else? Every time that Salah has been provoked, he's given a reaction through the media. They always talk about, he's only ever stopped 4 times for the media in the mix zone or whatever. And that was when he said there'll be fire. One of the times he said, that he was more out than in, if you remember about this time last year, and then this time against Leeds United. So every time he wants to use the media to convey a message, he does it. Every time he has the opportunity to do it, he does it. So this will it should come as no surprise to Liverpool that he's used the media in this way. Now, they could have counteracted it by, maybe giving him a few minutes against Leeds, because maybe then he mightn't have spoken out, because he will have played. But I just think that they've sidelined him to such an extent that he's bitten back. But you're right to say that the discussion has moved on all of a sudden from whether Slot is the man to take Liverpool forward into, has Salah been the problem all along? And yeah, like I say, I'm putting that out there for the sake of balance, to say that Salah probably shouldn't have said what he said at the time that he said it, in the context that he said it, especially after the team dropping another 2 points. But it should come as no surprise to Liverpool. The challenge now is, are they able to move on without Salah and get that same set of results that they got last season with Salah in the team? I'm not sure they can.
Yeah, it's hard to look at performances, even the performances with Salah and the team. Look, say those are convincing performances. 1-0 win against Iran, great on paper, but probably not on the pitch. 3-3 against Leeds, no. Definitely not, etc. So you kind of have to look at how long Slot will get if these performances don't improve. Like you said, without Salah, that this is going to put even more pressure on Slot now.
I think they're right now, Ronan. I think they're going game to game. Like, I think Liverpool are living hand to mouth. You see, look, at the start of the season, if someone said to you that Liverpool's back four was going to be Joe Gomez, Ibrahim Konate, Virgil van Dijk and Andy Robertson, after spending all that money on Frimpong and Kirkes and Leone, and just about missing out on Mark Gahey, you would have got long odds on Joe Gomez starting any game for Liverpool this season. They're trying to sell him in the summer. And then was the midfield supposed to be, Curtis Jones sort of as a false nine somewhere along the way, Dominic Szoboszlai playing off the right wing, and then McAllister and Gravenberch playing in midfield? Look, that was not supposed to be Liverpool's midfield this season. You can't kid me into believing that this is the vision. Okay, he's picking a team, he's trying to get 1 or 2 days ahead of himself right now. He's trying to just buy that tiny little bit of time into the future by picking a team for the here and now, for one specific result. I don't see the evidence that he's able to construct an attacking unit where Liverpool are going to have an identity. This is where Wirtz plays. This is where Isak plays. This is where Ekitike plays. Everything just seems to be, a bit hard scrabbled at the moment and living hand to mouth. Because you can't tell me that he convinced Florian Wirtz to come to the club to play as number 10 ahead of Real Madrid and ahead of Manchester City. Starts him at number 10, then drops him. Brings him back into the team occasionally at right wing, drops him. Brings him back into the team at left wing in place of Gakpo, and drops him again. That's not vision. That's not vision to me. Likewise, buying Ekitike and Isak in the one summer. We saw them try to play together last night at Inter. They look like strangers. They're occupying the same position in the team, looking for the same balls, and they're both struggling for involvement as a result. There's no vision here. And Salah is only one tiny part of that attacking unit. There's another 4 or 5 players to go on the pitch alongside Salah, and they need to be put in some sort of coherent shape by Slot. I just don't see it. I do not see it right now. This is a million miles away from what we expected from Liverpool once they made all those signings over the summer. And even when they won those first few games of the season, they won the first 5 games of the season, they're cruising, quite serene, even if they're getting bailed out at the last minute and so forth. But the results were still going onto the board. But, since about, I think, maybe mid-September onwards, it's just been a complete meltdown. A complete meltdown.
Yeah, you kind of have to wonder how long that's going to be. And we're coming into this busy Christmas period where there's matches taken fast. So you kind of get into that stage. And you also have the looming shadow from Real Madrid called Xabi Alonso. And he was asked about it this week. He spoke about it. He talked about being a possible future Liverpool manager, and down the road, he's under severe pressure at Real Madrid. I know we're recording before they played the Champions League on Wednesday, and he's kind of on a game-to-game basis at Real Madrid too. So, that has to put on so much pressure, and that has to kind of give the higher-ups at Liverpool, how committed are we to this Arne Slot guy, and what if Xabi Alonso is available? Do we pull the trigger then?
Ronan, I think if Xabi Alonso had made himself available towards the end of that 23-24 season when Klopp was leaving, then we wouldn't be having this discussion, because Alonso would be already the Liverpool manager. We know coming towards the end of that season, unbeaten season for Leverkusen in the league and in the cup, got to the Europa League final as well. He declared that he wasn't going to leave, that he was going to stay for another season and see what happened. Now, Leverkusen were dismantled a little bit. It kind of limped over the line a little bit in the Bundesliga last season, and then obviously he took his leave and went to Real Madrid. Now, look, it wouldn't be beyond the pale to say that he was considered for the Liverpool job back then, and they seemed to move towards other candidates like Amorim and Arne Slot once Alonso was out of the running. So maybe Alonso was first choice all along, although that's not the way it's been conveyed in the media ever since. Now, it does create a problem for Slot. I actually think Liverpool have played the one element of the whole Slot era to perfection. Now, in the summer, I would have said they need to renew his contract because it only lasts until 2027. And obviously, he's going to have lucrative offers from elsewhere, being a Premier League winning manager. But they actually did to Slot, I think, what they ended up doing to Salah over a contract renewal, which is prove yourself. And he hasn't been able to do that so far. Now, if they had given him a massive new contract till 2029 or 2031 on 12 million a year rather than the 6.5 that he's supposedly earning right now, it would have created a huge headache for them when it came to terminating that deal. Right now, I've read reports that deal for Slot and his staff to be terminated right now would cost the club somewhere in the region of 8 million, which is not an awful lot in the context of a Premier League football club.
It's one Trent Alexander-Arnold early for the Club World Cup.
Exactly, yeah. You're getting a month's worth of Trent Alexander-Arnold there, really. And obviously the attraction for Alonso is if he's been by Real Madrid is you don't have to pay anything for him because he's not under any contract and he's free to start work at Liverpool. He's got different problems to Slot. Look, I think tactics and teamwork and all of that kind of stuff and philosophy works at most clubs, but it's not going to work at Real Madrid. These are highly paid, highly pampered, highly indulged, luxurious players who are used to having things their own way. And if a manager comes in and tries to, undercut that or cut their privileges, they don't last very long. We saw it with Rafa Benitez. We saw it with Lopetegui. We're seeing it now with Xabi Alonso, is that this Real Madrid dressing room, whatever iteration of this Real Madrid dressing room, only seems to respond to light touch managers. Your Zidanes, your Ancelottis, who let them get on with it, who indulge them to a certain extent, but get results out of it at the end of the day. Sometimes I think that this Real Madrid dressing room thinks they're too good for conventional tactics, too good for pressing, too good for collective teamwork. And look, it's cheaper to sack a manager than it is to get rid of Vinicius, Mbappe, Bellingham, all these other guys who aren't doing the dirty work for Alonso. Now, I think he would be well suited for Liverpool, I'll be honest, because I think that if you look at the signings that they've made, Frimpong, Kerkez, Wirtz, if you look at the players that they've been linked to, Gehi, Schlotterbeck, Semenyo, I think they're building this squad to be more adaptable, to be able to play a 3-4-3, a 3-5-2 at times, which Slot won't do. And Alonso would be absolutely perfect to pick up a team to mould into a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2 team. He did it at Bayer Leverkusen with Wirtz as a centrepiece, with Frimpong in the team. We know that Kerkez could play left wing back. We know that Gehi could come in and play in a back three. I just have a feeling that he would be able to be a lot more tactically flexible and maybe show a little bit more ingenuity than Slot's been able to do. Because I'm looking at Slot's squad list from all his career, Alkmaar into Feyenoord and now into Liverpool. He doesn't vary from his 4-2-3-1. And if the players can't perform in that particular system, then there's going to be a problem. But I think Liverpool are constructing a squad to outgrow Slot. And maybe the decision not to give him a contract, as I said, over the course of the summer, when I was crying out for one, will be vindicated because they'll be able to get rid of him on the cheap and bring in somebody like Alonso as a replacement.
Yeah, to be very intrigued to see how he could do if he does come in, but that's a wait and see at the moment. Everything seems to be a wait and see. So hopefully we provide you with a lot of insight and a lot of analysis on where we stand at the moment on Liverpool, what Liverpool's crisis currently looks like, but we will wait and see what happens. We
will.
Yes. Before we go, we have the hero and villain of the week. Peter, I think you're choosing the villain, so I get started with the hero. My hero of the week is winter football is back. We got some great snow football, a fantastic bicycle kick in the Canadian Premier League a few weeks ago. Could be for the Puskas Award. We had Kairat in the Champions League kicking off early on Tuesday because of weather conditions. The match had to be moved because it was -14 in Almaty or -18 or something. They went to Astana, which was also in the minuses, but at least they had under soil heating so they could get it a bit warmer there. They almost held on for a draw against Olympiacos. They could have picked up a point there, but winter football is back, so I'm looking forward to the orange ball, the yellow ball, all the fluorescent balls. I love a bit of winter football. Give me the snow games everywhere. That's going to be my hero this week. And your villain is is expected from the Transfers podcast. If you listen to anybody in any episode, your villain is exactly what we're.
Yeah, I'm definitely singing off the Duncan Castles hymn sheet here. I'm picking Gianni Infantino as my villain of the week, because I think we got a glimpse into football's dystopian future last week with that World Cup draw. I don't know what was going to make me gag most, whether it was Trump coming out for his peace award or whether it was Trump dancing to the village people. Or whether it was Rio Ferdinand getting snotty with a reporter who'd asked him whether he'd ever scored a goal against Iker Casillas. The whole thing was an absolute farce and really spells out the danger and the treacherous waters that I think Infantino is steering the global game into. Look, it was reprehensible from that self-congratulatory peace prize that the US president got. To how long and bloated the entire World Cup draw felt, sort of the awkward, stilted conversations with celebrities. The whole thing was a nightmare. And then that's followed up by, we're going to have mandatory 3-minute cooling breaks at the World Cup next summer. It just remains to be seen how many ads can be rammed down our throats during those cooling breaks once the World Cup kicks off next year, because I think it's the start of what the Americans have always wanted, and that's cutting football into quarters, 22-minute quarters. So I'm a little bit horrified by what we're about to experience at the World Cup next summer, because the World Cup is such a good tournament and it's such a unifying experience that it doesn't need anything else. It really does not need anything else. It doesn't need the village people. It doesn't need Robbie Williams. It doesn't need Nicole Scherzinger. It just doesn't require it. And yet this glitz and glamour that we're attaching to it with Infantino, who seems to love being stuck in the middle of the whole thing, is just, I don't know. I don't like it. It's turning me off somewhat. I don't want to sound like an old stuck in the mud and a grumbler, but I don't think anyone in football wants this, from young to old. They don't want Trump front and center. They don't want peace awards. They don't want the rubbish that we saw in Washington the other day. I think we really would love to stick to the football on this one. And I think the sooner that Infantino's reign as FIFA president is over, the better.
Yeah, who knows how long that lasts. But just compare the scenes of that compared to what we really saw for the World Cup qualifiers, the Curaçao celebrations, Cape Verde, all that. That is what football is meant to be. And yeah, the FIFA World Cup draw, not so much. But,
no.
But Ireland's name were read out, so that's all that matters. And Scotland for Duncan. That's the main thing we'll take.
Well, Scotland are there. Ireland still have a bit of a treacherous path to navigate. But yeah, I mean, football is about stories. It's about these national unifying moments. I mean, there'll be a kid in Curaçao, or there'll be a kid, in Jordan, for example, or Uzbekistan, who've seen their country qualify maybe for the first and only time to a World Cup, and that could set them on their own journey. Boys and girls. And, that's what football is all about. We remember it, Ronan, when we first qualified for a World Cup as Irish boys. And these are the things that stick with you for life. There's really nothing like it. But you don't get these moments of delirium from, watching Donald Trump dance to the village people at a World Cup draw. You just don't. You get them from there's something about football. There's something about late goal scoring that just electrify you. And we don't need the glitz and glamour. We just do not. Football is good enough to speak for itself.
And now a 3-minute cooling break powered by Gatorade.
Have we got a sponsor? Finally.
Yeah. Yeah, if you are Gatorade, please reach out to us. Thanks very much for your time today, Peter. I hope it's been insightful for our viewers and listeners.
Yes, and thank you for having me on, Ronan. I'd like to wish all our listeners a very Merry Christmas, because I'm unlikely to be on the pod again before December 25th.
Well, who knows what's going to happen with Liverpool in the next 2 weeks. Maybe we will. Maybe we will. Thanks, Peter. You've been listening to the Transfers podcast, powered by FootballTransfers.com. If you liked what you heard, Please follow, share, and rate us. Your support helps us bring you more news, analysis, and insight. You can message us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at Transfers Podcast. Our Twitter and Blue Sky address is at TransfersCast. You can find Peter over at Anfield Watch on all social media. That's where you can follow Anfield Watch. Our production is by Mark Caulfield at Pro Podcast Production. Our music is by Mark Caulfield and David L. Stay safe, be well, and thank you for listening.
We did the transfer window. Ian McGarry, who left us and wasn't known for a couple of years. Duncan was old. Now he's back with a new show. It's called The Transfers. It's where everyone's gonna go. The transfers, the transfers, the transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. The transfers, the transfers, the transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. 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 Where everyone's gonna go.